Hello, my name is Daniel Cervan-Gil. I'm Manager of Programs at the Global Center for Pluralism. I'm delighted to be joined today by Waidehi Gokhale from Soliya. This interview is part of the Center's Pluralism and the Pandemic online portal, a curated collection of writing, interviews, and videos exploring responses to the pandemic around the world from many fields of practice. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
Very good, thank you. The first question that I had for you, we've seen that during this global health crisis, issues around around the world on equality, equity, inclusion are being revealed and exacerbated in all sectors. What have you witnessed in your sector and in the regions where Soliya works? And what can your sector learn from this experience?
Sure, thank you. So we do virtual exchange programming with young people from various parts of the world. And this relies on, we have an online platform that we use to do this work, and it was designed and built specifically to accommodate for varying landscapes of technology. And so it's built to ensure that those with very low bandwidth access to internet can still access our platform and still engage in the programming. Now, through the crisis, what we've seen is, first of all, there is vast inequity in terms of accessibility, which we all know. I think what has concerned us more is that this inequity leads to the possibility that people have a lack of access to information, just basic information, which is, something that I think that the world will collaboratively need to address. The other issue that we've seen is, as usually participants from rural parts of various different countries are still able to successfully access our platform and engage in the programming. However, during the current crisis, we've seen some fluctuation in that because whilst accessing the platform when nobody else is from your home using your internet connection allows young people to continue participating, when everybody is at home and using the internet connection, participants from all over the world have experienced some fluctuation. And so I think that this is something that the world and the technology field will have to take into consideration. I think this is something that the education field is going to have to address. Our work sort of sits on an intersection of education, technology, and diplomacy, or peace building, if you like. And in that sector, the fact is that people have really appreciated the ability to engage and exchange about their experiences through an online platform where they can see each other and hear each other at a time when everybody is, separated and isolated.
So in the post-pandemic world, you kind of hinted at it. What should be the priorities of this sector? How do you see it evolving? Virtual exchange, education, what are we learning during the pandemic that can actually help us improve the way we do things after this is over?
So for our field, I think that the commitment of this field has always been to ensure that voices come to the table and remain at the table. And the idea is that these are voices who would otherwise either not choose to have access to one another or would not be able to have access to one another. So that's really the core premise of the field, right? You bring these people together because you want them to increase their levels of empathy, their levels of critical thinking. You want them to engage deliberately and with curiosity with one another's humanity, with a view to changing the lens through which they function in their communities and across their communities. And I think that if there's anything that the pandemic has really taught us is how vital that humanity, empathy, compassion, the notion of understanding one another's realities is to combating something like this, to combating a global health crisis, for example, or it could be a global environmental crisis, whatever it is. The truth is that there are certain core tenets that need to be nurtured in order to create the kind of leadership that we need to see us through these moments. So that, I think, is a big learning for the field. And then I think the field will, need to do some advocacy with the technology sector to try and ensure that some basic level of access is made more ubiquitous because of its importance in moments like this.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned empathy, and I wonder, how do you promote empathy when people are not able to connect at a physical level? We are all forced now to connecting across the world through work and with our families and our friends online. So we may be able to relate a little bit more, but I would like you to elaborate a little bit more on Soliya's methodology and theory of change, and how do you see the virtual space being reimagined so that it promotes the empathy that is required for people to engage constructively with difference?
Sure. So for us, empathy, we think of it not as a soft skill or a nice to have concept. We really think about it as a superpower. It's something that is a necessary piece of how people need to function in the world. We see it as an intentional practice. So for us, the way that the pedagogy behind our programming works is empathy has three pieces to it. So one is an internal reflective piece. So self-awareness, understanding your own stereotypes, biases, triggers, and so understanding your own why, if you like. And then the second piece of empathy is a commitment to leaning in and listening to the why of others, which differs from yours, and understanding where it comes from. So really providing the space and commitment to hearing why you don't think or feel the same way that I do. And then the third piece of it is a commitment to sort of activating around empathy, practicing it, committing to the idea that you will use this methodology, if you like, as a lens through which not just how you interact with other people, but how you make choices, how you make decisions. And we've been doing this work for, I think we're in our 17th year. And we made a very deep commitment to measuring change. So how do we know that we're having any impact at all on people's levels of empathy? And so we've worked with social scientists and neuroscientists who have helped us design and implement our monitoring and evaluation work. And so we've been able to show change in a couple of different things. A large part of this, empathy piece is understanding humanity, humanization. And then the other piece is how much do I think my identity, my core identity overlaps with yours, and what difference that makes to how I experience our engagement, how much I feel that you care, what happens to me, and how much respect I feel is offered to me by you. And those, we think, are the pieces that make up how you measure whether there is any change in empathy. And so we measure that. We use the tools that we have, and we measure it before and after participants go through the programming, and we also measure it against control groups, and we measure it with time lapse. So 4 months out, 6 months out, and so on.
That's wonderful. So from those 17 years of experience, what advice would you have to educators, people that are working with youth, on how to address one of the worrisome trends that we're seeing during the pandemic, which is the using the virus as a pretext to promote hate speech online, for example? So how do we equip youth to better address those instances of hate speech when they encounter it online?
Yeah, so I think there's two pieces to this. I think there's one element, which is the types of online platforms that people are engaging in this sort of speech on. And I think one of the common threads of most of those platforms tends to be that there is a level of anonymity. And it's asynchronous. You know, someone will have said something, you can say something there. You don't ever need to look at each other in the eyes. You don't need to know who the other person is. You can just make, you know, a very aggressive or caustic or inappropriate or hateful remark. And then it's a very quick escalation from there, you know. I think that if you have an online platform, or if you create online spaces where people are actually seeing one another and engaging with one another synchronously, it makes an enormous difference. And I think the more you can create the possibility that, and then the second piece of online platforms is human nature means that we tend to seek out like-minded, you know, and so what happens in online platforms are massive silos, right? Whereas again, if you create platforms and opportunities where you're bringing together those who wouldn't otherwise choose to come together, then you're opening up that possibility of real engagement around the notion of difference. And once you do that, then you have put a name to a face, you've put a story to a human being, you know, so the next time, if you've had an online engagement with someone, so for example, let's say you're a youth in, you know, the Netherlands, and you have an online engagement in which there are various different participants. You can see each other, you can hear each other, and you come from 8 or 10 different parts of the world. The next time you read something in the media that is relevant to either the geography or the perceived identity of one of those people, that we prove it over and over again, that it provides you with a new filter. So when I read a story about something that happened in Syria, I see it through the eyes and ears and kind of identity of the young person that I met during this online experience. And I'm much less inclined to consume the media or the information just point blank, and I'm inclined to think critically. I'm inclined to think about that person, you know, and attach them to the information. And that, I think, will really change how people use online platforms to interact.
Thank you. We're running out of time, unfortunately. This is very interesting. I have a last question for you, Waidehi. Sure. If we were to hold on to one good thing that we've learned during this pandemic, what would that be?
One good thing that we've learned during this pandemic. So, look, I think we have to look around ourselves and across the globe and realize that the ways in which we did good and made progress in this moment all have some things in common, and they all involve a lean into the idea of empathy, to the idea of compassion, to the idea of cohesion, collaboration. That's where the wins are going to come from this, you know. Even if leaders from around the world were being dissonant, the medical community ensured that they, in fact, went the route of lending each other support, engaging with each other collaboratively, you know, that kind of thing. And that's where the win's going to come from. That's where the vaccine's going to come from, you know. And so I think that has to be the silver lining, the hope that people will reflect and understand the notion of empathy as a hard skill and practice that we all need to commit to in order to move forward together.
Thank you very much, Waidehi, for joining me today.